Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Israel at War, an update on day 461 of the war, which started on October the 7th, 2023, by a horrific onslaught and massacre by Hamas, then joined by Hezbollah in the north, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran, of course, attacking Israel directly twice, last April and then last October. And of course, there is terror in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and attacks from Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere. Our two panelists today are both Brigadier Generals in the Israeli Air Force Reserve, Brigadier General Doron Gavish, the commander of the Israel Air and Missile Defense Task Force, and formerly the commanding general of the entire air and missile defense array. General Gavish, welcome.
Shalom, Amir, and good to see Yaron Rosen with us.
Yes, you already stole my thunder. I was going to surprise you, but as a seasoned soldier, you preempted me. So Brigadier General Yaron Rosen, formerly a base commander and leader in the Air Force, as well as the cyber staff chief for the entire IDF. General Rosen, welcome too.
Happy to be back.
Thank you. Over the last 24 hours, Israel was notified that two of the hostages held in Gaza have died in captivity, and that their bodies, or in one case a body, in another case possibly the remains, were recovered, and therefore the number of hostages, dead and alive, still in captivity is now down to 98. Approximately half of this number are considered to be alive. The number of soldiers killed since October the 7th, including on that day, as publicized by the IDF, is now 831. Because 3 Armor Corps troopers were killed yesterday and were brought for burial from Gaza. This number also includes those who were killed on the Lebanese front. So, General Gavish, let me ask you first regarding the number of casualties, of fatalities. We'll get to the wounded a bit later. During the 1967 Six-Day War, in which Israel or the IDF conquered 3 Arab armies, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, in less than a week, Israel lost 800 soldiers. And here we are, 15 months after this war started, and already the number of soldiers killed is higher. And one can argue, of course, whether the cost has brought the military benefit expected. How should Israel consider this human cost in soldiers? Of course, there is also the civilian cost, but let's concentrate on that.
Well, at the end of your sentence, you probably said the most important thing, which is relevant to this war, and this is the civilian cost that we had and what happened to our civilians at the beginning of this war. We have to remember that soldiers are there risking their life, taking into consideration that something like this might happen to them, but not to our civilians. So, of course, when we go to those numbers, those are unprecedented numbers from, unfortunately, in one day from our history or after World War II and the Holocaust. When it comes to the soldiers themselves, it's really hard to me to answer this question because it's not everything about body count, and I don't even like to look at it at this way. I think that the IDF, from a value point of view, is doing whatever is necessary in order to defeat our enemies. This is a long war, the longest war that we basically ever had as a country. We are fighting in Gaza, we are fighting in Lebanon, we are fighting in the West Bank. So this is also a multi-directional fight, different arenas. Our pilots are flying to Iran, are flying to Yemen and the Houthis. So a lot of them, soldiers in the air, in the sea, on ground, are putting their lives in risk. And when you fight against terror, this is also something that needs to be adapted. The doctrine should be adapted, the way of fighting. And unfortunately, part of the fight is that some of our soldiers are killed and wounded. If you look on what we achieved until today, Israel, a year after the war started, for sure, we could say that from a military strategic point of view, the amount of damage that our enemies suffered, the point that we are, that we have no more Syrian army. The Hezbollah was heavily damaged. Of course, the Hamas. So from this point of view, of course, the job has been done. But as we know, wars, it's not only about the military part. There is the political one, the strategic one, and this is basically where we are at this point, at least when it comes to the Gaza Strip and the Hezbollah in the north. And we see where are we going with our eastern arena, reminding all of us that the big story is really Iran. Everything starts and ends there. And the destabilizer of this region is they are the Iranians, and this is the storm.
General Rosen, obviously, General Gavish raised a very important point. Circumstances are all important. When Israel preempted in 1967, it held its casualties to a bearable number. When the Arabs struck first in 1973, and then again 50 years later, of course, Israel suffered many casualties, both in absorbing the first blow and then in counterattacking. But let me ask you also regarding the various branches and doctrines of the Israeli Defense Forces. There is this traditional debate regarding the advantages and disadvantages of ground maneuver against fire from a standoff range, mostly from the air, also by artillery, naval fire. And if we look at it through the prism of casualties, which is our topic for the day, we see that the Air Force and the Navy suffered a few casualties. One helicopter crashed and the medevac team was killed. One sailor was killed when an errant missile hit his vessel. But all the other, almost 400 soldiers killed after October the 7th, during the ground maneuver into Gaza and the same in Lebanon. All of them came from the ground forces, infantry, armor, engineering, and the rest. Doesn't it mean that the advocates of air power were right, that perhaps Israel should have refrained from ground maneuver and tried to achieve its goal only from afar.
So, Amir, two very simple answers to your question. One, no, and the second thing is a nation that cannot defend its border is not a nation. Okay, starting from that, and the reason is to achieve victory in the very complex arena that Israel is in. Can never end with air power or standoff fire. It's just you cannot achieve what you need to achieve with only firepower, standoff, and all these dreams. And I'm saying this as an airman, but I have quite a lot of experience with ground forces. I'm a division commander myself, and I'm telling you that achieving these military goals, which end up in how the political level can take it from there and achieve the strategic goals of a war, cannot end only with air power. This is not, we're not in Yugoslavia of the 90s. This is something completely different. Additional to that, I think that the very basic question of measuring success through how Doron called it, the body count is just a big mistake. The context is very different, and context change throughout the years. We're in a very unique context. This war started with a huge failure of Israel not defending its borders, and the military had to get back, and it did it very well and achieved huge success and actually changed the face of the Middle East through quite extraordinary military gains that were all together, each one separately, and all together a blend of air, land, and naval forces, achieving goals that are basically a total war, as in a context very different from other wars. And the enemies we're fighting are all paramilitary, even though they are with military strengths per se. Very different from the 6-Day War, which was against militaries of nations as we know them, and it started with a blow to the air forces of all the militaries around us, and then it started with the rest. Today, projecting power for these paramilitary forces, Hamas, Hezbollah, even Iran, I'll call it, it's a nation that uses paramilitary tactics, terror, to achieve its goals through proxies and through other means. All this cannot be countered only with air power. Of course, if you talk about the Houthis and Iran, because they are far away, it's a blend of special forces and air power. Whether it's special forces from the IDF or the Mossad or who knows what by foreign sources. But I think that the number of casualties, what is proportionate to a total war which Israel is fighting for the last 15 months, is a question, but it's not the main question. The question is, has the IDF achieved its goals? I think the answer is yes. Has Israel as a nation achieved its goals? It's yet to be proven or yet to be finalized, because the war is not totally over, and the political level needs to take these military blows that the IDF gave the political level and now turn it into national security, long-term stability, future, if you will, in all directions, changing the reality for the future of the Middle East and Israel, of course.
Doron, in addition to the 831 soldiers killed in action, there are some 5,600 wounded. That is, wounded badly enough to be evacuated to hospital and then treated in hospital, Most of them, of course, have already been released, but there are still hundreds who are still in hospital. And that brings two questions. One is whether this ratio of killed to wounded is better than in earlier wars, because the medical staff of the IDF has been fantastic in getting to the wounded in time, treating them in the field, and saving their lives. And the other question is not of a human nature, but organizational. If so many soldiers have been taken out of the order of battle, that means that Israel is now short several brigades, because all of the wounded have been in combat. How does it impact the Israeli plans to recruit and train more infantrymen, armor corps, etc.?
Well, for your first part of the question, Amir, there is no doubt that the doctrine that was developed during this war, the way of fighting, the techniques, the doctrines, as I said, brought us to a point that we have less wounded and casualties from the potential of such a war. We have to remember that we are fighting mainly in Gaza, an urban war, which is a very, very challenging one. And if we would compare the ratio of fighting in such an area, so indeed the IDF had less from what it even expected. And also our enemies, by the way. The reason for it is, at first, as I mentioned, the doctrine was adapted. There are several units, mainly 669, which is the evacuation unit, Air Force evacuation unit. There are forces on the air, in the ground. And this is the first thing. The evacuation speed, I would say, was amazing if you compare it to any other area. We're talking about 15 minutes from the moment that someone is being treated to the point that he finds himself in average, that he finds himself in the hospital. This is very, very, very quick. Of course, Gaza Strip is very close to, at the end of the day, we are close to Israel, so it is on our border, therefore it helps. And so it is a combination of the situation, the doctrine, the way that our forces are being trained in order to be able to do this. So fortunately, a lot of lives were saved, and from the number of people that were wounded, if we didn't have this unique doctrine capabilities and way of fighting and or way of saving our soldiers, probably a lot of them, unfortunately, could be in much worse situation. So a lot of life were saved during this war. For the number of soldiers, I think that the question is more looking toward the future. And this is one of the main inner issue today of Israel, to see that every Israeli citizen is taking the burden of being part of this country, and be part of this country is contributing to it. There are all kinds of ways. This is a huge debate now inside of Israel, mainly with the ultra-Orthodox sector, which is a very large sector, that the vast majority of them are not in the IDF, are not taking part in the burden that we feel during this time, although they feel that they do take part in the burden, because from their point of view, when they pray, so they're basically saving We believe that we could do both of them. We could pray, but we could need to fight. And this is, of course, one of the main questions that are on the table today. From the IDF point of view, the IDF would like to have as much as it could more soldiers, and the ultra-Orthodox are part of Israel, and some of them are also, thousands of them are at the end today, they are part of the IDF, so it could be much more.
Yaron, this entire topic is, of course, tragic, and it's uncomfortable to discuss several aspects of it. But it's inevitable, especially if one wants to go deeper into lessons learned and avoid the avoidable for the future. Out of the 831 fatalities that the IDF has suffered up to now, 60 have been killed in so-called operational incidents. Of course, earlier it had the name friendly fire, which was nothing but friendly force on force or blue on blue. And these incidents had to do with units firing at each other, or people being run over at night by vehicles or tanks. Now, you have been at the Air Force, but also interfacing with the ground forces in your career. You also have some experience with helicopter accidents. What can the chain of command do to lessen this terrible aspect of war?
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, connecting it to what Doron explained very well, back in World War II, the ratio of wounded and killed were about, for every 3 to 4 wounded, 1 soldier was killed. And it went, and it got better and better as we advanced. The years that post-2000 conflicts have about 7 to 10 wounded, 1 killed for every 7 to 10 wounded. So we're getting much better, and that is due to, thanks to the reasons that Doron explained, whether it's people, process, or technology, improved medical, actually improved medicine, because in World War II, soldiers died from infections and lack of care, all the way to how they are evacuated rapidly from the battlefield, improved trauma where it is located, and also improved body armor. And we all know that the tanks today have a self-defense, an active defense, sort of a system that is very much like the Iron Dome, but for a tank or for whatever vehicle that's inside the battlefield. So technology is also helping with that. Same thing with how the combined forces are fighting inside a very sophisticated battlefield, such as urban warfare, such as Gaza, or also in Lebanon. When you have to fight these joint operations between ground forces and air forces and naval forces, all the technologies that help produce, first of all, the common picture of the battlefield, and then how do you identify friends or foes? All these things are getting better and better over time, but still very, very complex to go all the way down to the last soldier in the platoon. That is where most of the mistakes happen, when the last foot soldier is not aware that he is not on the battlefield situational awareness digital map, because he doesn't have some kind of digital transmitter, because not everyone can have that. It goes down until a certain level in the ground forces. And so one locator actually represents many soldiers around him, and sometimes some of them go beyond the division lines and they get by mistake hurt, or some of the ground forces identify a neighbor friend as a foe, and they direct air power onto a friend instead of a foe. So these mistakes will never go away completely, but as technology improves, and there are some new technologies that actually grew through the last 15 months and helped the ground forces really take these numbers of the friendly fire numbers really down when you're talking about joint operations. This is something that we will see coming out of the war into what we will see later on sadly, in future conflicts that we will have. And I'm sure the IDF will learn from it, will develop new technologies, the private sector will come in, and hopefully that will lower the numbers more and more as we move forward with this issue.
In that regard, because we are running out of time, let me just acknowledge for Doron Gavish's or on Doron Gavish's behalf that there were no significant incidents in the air and missile defense in Israel intercepting by accident friendly aircraft. In the Red Sea, of course, a U.S. Navy destroyer accidentally shot down an F-18 from a friendly aircraft carrier. So we will have to stop with that, just acknowledge that. This has been the Israel at War update today with General Doron Gavish and General Yaron Rosen. We will be back for another update next week. And for the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.